Scripture reading this morning will be from Numbers chapter 27, verses 15 through 23. Moses said to the Lord, "May the Lord, the God who gives breath to all living things, appoint someone over this community to go out and come in before them, one who will lead them out and bring them in, so the Lord's people will not be like sheep without a shepherd." So the Lord said to Moses, "Take Joshua, son of Nun, a man in whom is the spirit of leadership, and lay your hand on him. Have him stand before Eleazar the priest and the entire assembly and commission him in their presence. Give him some of your authority so the whole Israelite community will obey him. He is to stand before Eleazar the priest, who will obtain decisions for him by inquiring of the Urim before the Lord. At his command, he and the entire community of the Israelites will go out, and at his command they will come in." Moses did as the Lord commanded him. He took Joshua and had him stand before Eleazar the priest and the whole assembly. Then he laid his hands on him and commissioned him, as the Lord instructed through Moses. You may be seated.
It is the weekend at the end of fall break for many of our students, and so I know that we still have many who are traveling, but that also means that we have some who are visiting with us, and we're especially grateful for your presence. Ron and Gail, great to have you back. It's wonderful to see you. We do remind you about the life group meetings this afternoon and this evening all around Broken Arrow and Tulsa. And see one of the elders or one of the ministers, and we'll direct you to some life group leaders. We would love to get you involved in one of those groups. And remember the Fall Festival next Sunday evening. There's still plenty of room to sign up. That will be next Sunday evening on the 28th from, I believe, 5 to 7 p.m. And then 2 weeks from today, Steve Diggs will be here for the Retooled and Refueled seminar. In our Cloud of Witnesses study that we're focusing on Life Group Sundays, and all of these lessons, again, are by your suggestion. We asked you, who among the great men and women of faith about whom we read in Scripture would you like to focus on once a month in this study? And so we're just systematically working through that list, today focusing on Joshua. And we're not going to encounter Joshua in the text of Scripture as you read through Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and the book of Joshua. You're not going to encounter him until Exodus chapter 17. When the Israelites are already out of Egypt, they are beginning to encounter enemies along the way as they make their way to the land of promise. But I want to go ahead and share some things that have to be true about Joshua, even though we don't specifically read about these things in the text of Scripture. First of all, his given name is Hoshea. That's what his father and mother named him. His father, Nun of the tribe of Ephraim, but don't get in your mind of the tribe of Ephraim in the sense that they are in their tribal allotments in the land of Canaan. Joshua is born in Egypt. His mother and father were born in Egypt. And they name him Hoshea, which means salvation. And maybe this indicates the faith that they have in the God of their forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that they have only heard stories about. They have nothing in written form about their God or about their faith or about their forefathers. Everything has been passed down orally. And they're surrounded by false gods. They're surrounded by idols. They're surrounded by images of Ra and Isis and other gods and goddesses of Egyptian mythology. And so by maybe naming him Hoshea or salvation, we'll see later in the text how Moses is the one who calls Hoshea Joshua, and we'll look at the meaning of that name. But maybe they are praying for salvation from the oppression of slavery. Maybe they're praying for deliverance from their enemies. And so in hope and in whatever faith they have in the God of their forefathers, they name him salvation. So this is the context that Joshua grows up in. And he, along with the others, sees the mighty power of God separate the waters of the Red Sea. He, along with the rest, is probably fearful that destruction is imminent. They're trapped between the sea and the Egyptian army. He's witnessed the power of God in the 10 plagues that have been brought against Egypt. But how can they escape now? Trapped between Pharaoh's chariots and this huge body of water. And he sees the mighty hand of God part the waters. And then in joy and celebration and elation from the other side, watches as those waters engulf the chariots of Pharaoh. So now they're on the other side of the water. Now they're out of Egypt. Now what do we do? You know, life's pretty much been orchestrated for us up to this point. It's work, 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 and then work some more. Where are we going? How is God going to get us there? They're now launching into this great unknown. And now their concern isn't the Egyptian army that's been pursuing them. It's the armies that stand between them and the land of promise. And the first of those is the army of Amalek, the Amalekites. And this is where we get introduced to Joshua in Exodus chapter 17. I'm going to be moving rather rapidly this morning. There's a lot of text to cover. My PowerPoint didn't materialize this week. I think there were some great visuals that could have gone along with this lesson, but you'll have to work that out up in your head as we talk about those things, okay? Just picture some of these scenes. Exodus 17 is that familiar story of Moses going to the hilltop overlooking the battlefield. And when he raises his hands holding his staff, the staff of the Lord, Israel prevails. When his hands lower, Amalek prevails. This is an 80-year-old man. That's something that's hard to do for very long when you're a young man. And so Aaron and Hur, his brother Aaron and a man named Hur, take Moses, sit him on a rock, one man on either side of him, and they hold up his hands and the staff till the sun sets. And the Israelites prevail over Amalek, but what we forget in the story is who's out on the battlefield. Who's leading the charge? Joshua. He's there with his sword drawn. He's the one who, on the human end of the equation, is contributing to this victory. And that's how we meet Joshua. We haven't heard of him before. But we see him immediately as a man of valor, a man of courage, a man of strength, a man who will lead and has the capability of leading the army of God. The next time we see him is in Exodus 24, and amazingly, he goes up the mountain with Moses to receive the tablets of the law, written by the finger of God himself. The law of the Lord, the commandments of the Lord. And it's Joshua, as they are descending the mountain. What happens in the interim is Exodus 32, that horrible, unfortunate incident of the golden calf. While they are away and the people grow impatient, and they convince Aaron to collect all this gold and to fashion this image of a golden calf. And there's a long-term party going around this idol. And as Moses and Joshua come down the mountain, it's Joshua who says, hang on, I hear the sound of battle. He's got a sensitivity to that. He's a military leader. Moses is the one who says, no, that's not a victory cry, and that's not a cry of defeat. I hear singing. Kind of like Lee, and you're imagining walking to the throne of God, hearing the singing grow louder and louder. That's what they're hearing as they get further down the mountain. So it's Joshua who is accompanying Moses in this way. In fact, in Exodus 24:13, he's referred to as Moses' servant. So Moses arose with Joshua his servant. Moses went up the mountain of God. This isn't the regular word for servant in Hebrew. This is the word masharet. And so you may not read servant in your translation in this verse and in Joshua chapter 1, verse 1. King James Version says minister. My New American Standard says servant. The NIV says aid, A-I-D-E. The ESV and New Living Translation say assistant. The easy-to-read version says helper. We might call him today an intern, an apprentice, a mentoree. The elders and ministers have been doing a lot of reading about mentoring lately. A lot of discussion, increased activity when it comes to mentoring younger men, preparing them for leadership. That's exactly the benefit that Joshua has for quite some period of time with Moses. Numbers 11:28 says, Joshua the son of Nun, the attendant of Moses from his youth. He's still a young man when this relationship starts. And he's going to be in that position for 40 years in the wilderness. It's Joshua who is chosen to represent the tribe of Ephraim in Numbers chapter 13. So we've jumped from Exodus all the way to Numbers right now. Numbers chapter 13 is where some battles have already been won. And it looks like they're poised to enter the land of promise. But there's some recon that has to take place first. And there's going to be this elite group of special forces numbering 12, one man from each tribe. Joshua, already a proven military leader, is selected from the tribe of Ephraim. Caleb from the tribe of Judah. And I would be highly impressed if any of you could name the other 10. I think I could safely lay some money down on that one, maybe a significant amount of money, for anybody who could name, without looking at your Bible, the names of the other 10 spies. They're lost in obscurity, they're lost in the annals of Bible trivia because of their lack of faith. And this was truly, and these weren't just warm bodies. God tells Moses, I want you to choose leaders, significant people, proven people from each of these tribes. So the other 10 aren't just warm bodies who couldn't care one way or the other. They're supposedly qualified men of faith. And they're not walking around for 40 days with notebooks and cameras and taking pictures with their iPhones like tourists. You know, this is below the radar. This is a reconnaissance mission. And they all see the same thing, the same realities, the same data is gathered. It's undeniable. They all agreed on what was there. It was a productive land, truly a land flowing with milk and honey. They're going to bring back a cluster of grapes from the valley of Eshcol that has to be carried on a pole between two men. They bring back pomegranates. They bring back figs. They talk about the people in the land, the many people in the land, the strong people in the land, and the big and tall people of the land who live in these great walled cities. Everybody collects the same data. Everybody sees the same thing. And so Caleb, soon followed by Joshua, upon their return, a month and 10 days later, almost 7 weeks they were gone, almost 6 weeks they were gone. Caleb says, let's go get it. God said it was there. God said He would give it to us. Let's take it. And the 10 say, we can't. The people are too strong. It can't be done. Let's get rid of Moses, get rid of Aaron, appoint another leader, go back to Egypt. Joshua and Caleb just stone those guys. They don't know what they're talking about. Joshua says in Joshua chapter 14, beginning in verse 5. Actually, this is still... I'm sorry, I'm in Joshua. I should be in Numbers. That's why it's not reading correctly. This is Numbers chapter 14, people. Verse 5. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces in the presence of all the assembly of the congregation of the sons of Israel. Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh of those who had spied out the land tore their clothes. They spoke to all the congregation of the sons of Israel, saying, the land which we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord is pleased with us, then He will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord. Do not fear the people of the land, for they shall be our prey. Their protection has been removed from them. The Lord is with us. Do not fear them. But all the congregation said to stone them with stones. And so, because of the faithlessness of those 10 men died immediately. The rest of that generation would die slowly over the course of the next 40 years. Only Joshua and Caleb, among all the men aged 20 years and older, would survive the wilderness. They alone from their generation would enter the land of Canaan. As we read about the selection of those 12 men, we read in Numbers chapter 13, verse 16, these are the names of the men whom Moses sent to spy out the land, but Moses called Hoshea the son of Nun, Joshua. Hoshea means salvation. Moses calls him Yehoshua, or the shortened form Yeshua, which means Yahweh is salvation. God saves. Salvation is of the Lord. And that's something that this man believed, and so he gets a name that goes along with his heart. Because he believes the salvation, the deliverance of the people lies with the Lord. At the end of the book of Numbers, near the end of the book of Numbers, chapter 27, from which Nathan read just a few moments ago, it's interesting to see that Moses, now at the end of his life, nearing the end of his life, even though he knows Joshua so well, he's been his apprentice, his mentoree, he's been his intern for about 40 years, proven man of war, proven man of faith, proven man of courage, and yet Moses isn't going to be so presumptuous as to select his own successor, the next leader. So he takes it to the Lord and he says, Lord, you let me know who you want. Because these people are going to be left like sheep without a shepherd. It's going to take a special man with a special heart, with a special sensitivity, with extraordinary courage and incredible faith. And God says, it's who you were probably thinking it was. So go ahead and do it. It's Joshua. Take him, commission him, lay your hands on him. In him is the Spirit. Not sure exactly which Spirit. NIV kind of interpreted for us there, the Spirit of leadership. The word leadership isn't in the text. It's just the Spirit's in him. God's Spirit, a strong human spirit, Spirit of leadership, maybe a combination of all of those. But Joshua is the man for the job. He had the heart of a shepherd. And that same kind of heart is needed to lead God's people today. It's the kind of heart that later kings would need to have. Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 38, God says to Moses, charge Joshua, encourage him, strengthen him, for he shall go he shall go across at the head of the people. He shall give them as an inheritance the land which you will see. That was Moses' work as a mentor, was to encourage, was to strengthen Joshua for the work that lay ahead of him. He was a next generation leader. And through Joshua, Moses' leadership, Moses' legacy would continue, and we're called to be legacy builders as well. If the Lord delays, if the Lord doesn't return, if this next generation is at the helm of God's church, they are going to need faith, they're going to need strength, they're going to need courage, just like Joshua did. And so in Deuteronomy 31, verses 7 and 23, God says to Joshua, be strong and courageous. In Joshua chapter 1, Moses 3 times says to Joshua, be strong and courageous. You start getting the inkling that maybe strength and courage are going to be requisites for this job. It's like somebody who says, take an umbrella with you today, you're going to need it. 100% chance of rain, take your umbrella. You're going to encounter something that's going to require you have this. Or you're going to help somebody with a job, help somebody with a task, and they say, be sure to wear some clothes that you don't mind getting dirty or completely ruined because this is going to be messy. So wear what you need to wear. Gird your loins with something that you don't mind throwing away after this is over. God sees what lies ahead. He knows what the tests and the challenges and the obstacles and the opposition is going to be, and that's just from within Israel. That's not even counting the enemies of the people of God. That's just in-house stuff that's going to require strength and courage on His part. So God says you need strength and courage. Moses says you need strength and courage. This wasn't a canned speech. It was something he was truly going to need. Mark Zeiss, in his commentary on the book of Joshua, describes the setting of the beginning of the book this way. He says there's a new generation under new management that's poised to meet new challenges. Joshua and Caleb are of that generation, but it is new management. God's still in charge, but new human management. And so chapter 1 of Joshua, verse 7, God says, don't turn from my law to the left or the right. Verse 8, keep my law on your lips, meditate on it day and night, be careful to do all that's written in it. You're going to need that as a leader among my people. Joshua 1, verse 5, no man will be able to stand before you all the days of your life, not because you're so great, Joshua, but because I'm so great. and because I am with you. And as I have been with Moses, I will be with you. I will not fail you. I will not forsake you. And we have that blessed promise as well through the Spirit of God who indwells us. We don't have to rely on our own strength, our own power, our own wits. God says, I will be with you. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. Jesus says, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. And so in summary fashion, as we just scan the book that bears this leader's name, Joshua is the one who prepares them for the crossing of the Jordan. There's so many parallels between Moses and Joshua, and after you see a list of them, you go, oh yeah. Moses leads them through the Red Sea. Joshua leads them across the Jordan River. Moses is told to take off his shoes for he's standing on holy ground. Joshua is told the same thing in chapter 5 when he encounters the captain of the Lord's army. Either a manifestation of God Himself in some pre-incarnate form, as some believe. Maybe the angel of the Lord, as he's sometimes described. But Joshua sees a man standing opposite him with his sword drawn. Normally he knows what this means. And so he says, are you with us or are you with them? And his reply is, I'm with God. Who are you with? I'm the captain of the Lord's army. Better question is, are you with me? Rather than, am I with you? And by the way, get your shoes off. You're standing on holy ground. He wrote the law upon a stone as Moses had, over and over again, all these parallels from one generation of leadership to the other. He has the men of Israel circumcised because for 40 years in the wilderness the male children have not been circumcised. So the men of Israel are circumcised, they observe the Passover. Now God leads them across the Jordan on dry ground, and here's this fortified city of Jericho. Joshua knows how to do battle. He knows military strategy. He knows how to attack this city. But it takes a lot of faith to follow the instructions that he gets. That's what it takes when God gives us things that sometimes we don't know exactly what to do with, that don't make sense from an earthly standpoint, that we don't completely comprehend and understand. We obey anyway, because it's the word of the Lord. So though it makes no military sense whatsoever, if you want a front guard followed by 7 priests with 7 horns, followed by Levites carrying the Ark of the Covenant, followed by the rear guard, if you want them to circle the city once a day for 6 days, 7 times on the 7th day, and then everybody yells, we'll do it. No earthly military sense whatsoever. That's the kind of faith that Joshua has. If you look for Joshua's name, in Hebrews chapter 11, the great chapter of faith, you won't find his name there, but you'll find Joshua there. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 30 reads, by faith, and you know how the chapter goes up to that point, right? By faith Abel, by faith Enoch, by faith Moses, by faith Abram. This is what they did. Interestingly, Hebrews 11:30 reads, by faith the walls of Jericho fell down after they had been encircled for 7 days. It wasn't the walls that had faith that caused them to fall down. It was Joshua that had faith. It was the priests and the Levites and the army and the people. It was their faith that God used to bring down those walls. He's a man of His word. Psalm 15 verse 4, in answer to the question of Psalm 15 verse 1, who can dwell in the presence of God? Who can live in His tent? And then in the verses that follow come the answer. And in verse 4 it says that this person who can dwell in the presence of God swears to his own hurt and does not change. When he gives his word, it's his word, no matter what it cost him. And Joshua gets tricked, he gets duped by some Gibeonites into thinking that they're from a long way away when they're locals. And he makes a peace treaty with them and makes a covenant with them, shakes hands on it, and he will not go back on his word. And it's in battle against Gibeon's enemies in the next chapter that the battle is going with Joshua against this alliance of 5 Amorite kings. And he says, Lord, I just need more daylight and I can finish this. So could you let the sun stop? Could you let the moon stop? Anybody ever ask you, when did daylight saving time begin? Joshua chapter 10. It stops in the middle of the sky. till battle's over, and text says more were killed by hailstones than by the sword. But nonetheless, if I can find my reference here, Joshua 10:14, there was no other day like that before it or after it when the Lord listened to the voice of a man. For the Lord fought for Israel. That man's voice was Joshua's. We've got to stop. But let me just throw out here another example of this man's wisdom. 2 kings had been defeated on the east side of the river while Moses was still alive. 2 Amorite kings, Og and Sihon. Joshua, under his leadership, 31 kings are defeated on the west side of the Jordan, between the Jordan and the Mediterranean. And Reuben, Gad, Manasseh, half on one side of the river, half on the other side of the river, they've got their tribal allotments. Judah and Ephraim, because of their prominence, they get their tribal allotments. There's 7 tribes that don't have their territory staked out yet. So he asked for 3 representatives from each of those 7 tribes, 21 surveyors altogether. This is on the up and up, no under the radar. They've got the land now. And he sends them out to survey the land and divide it into 7 portions. But this is where Joshua does what we would do with a couple of children when there's one big wedge of pie left that can be cut into 2 pieces. And you have one child cut it and the other child select the first piece. You talk about precision cutting, you know, extreme equality that results. He says, you go divide it into 7 portions and then we'll cast lots for who gets what. You can bet those were 7 equally distributed portions of inheritance when it came to water, when it came to timber, when it came to pasture. And he shows his great wisdom and leadership of the people. On your own, read the end of the story. His speeches in Joshua 22 and 23 and 24. 22 is where the 2.5 tribes are headed back across the Jordan to their inheritance. Chapter 23 is to the leaders. Chapter 24 is to the people. And in chapter 24, he rehearses all their relevant history to that point, starting with Abraham on down to the present. And in verse 13 of Joshua 24, I gave you a land on which you had not labored, and cities which you had not built. You've lived in them. You are eating of vineyards and olive groves which you did not plant. Now therefore fear the Lord, serve Him in sincerity and truth. Turn away from the gods which your fathers served beyond the river. That's the Euphrates River. That's Mesopotamia. That's the place where Abram came from. Put away those gods that you served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. If it's disagreeable in your sight to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves today whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served, which were beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. The people answered, far be it from us that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods. We'll serve Him. And Joshua says, no, I know you. No, you won't. You're not going to serve Him. They answer in verse 21, no, but we will serve the Lord. Joshua said to the people, you are witnesses against yourself that you have chosen for yourselves the Lord to serve Him. And they said, we are witnesses. Verse 24, they say, we will serve the Lord our God and we will obey His voice. And that's our call as well. That's our cry as well. We will serve the Lord our God. We will obey His voice. We are witnesses. We have entered into a covenant. We have entered into a relationship with Him through His Son, Yehoshua. His Son, Yeshua. Matthew 1:21, she'll bear a son, and you shall call His name Yehoshua. You shall call His name Jeshua. You shall call His name Joshua. In Greek, Jesus. In English, Jesus. For it is He who will save His people from their sins. Joshua believed that salvation was of the Lord, and so he got a name appropriate to his faith. The son of Mary was named Jesus because He was the salvation of the Lord, revealed in the flesh, and it's to Him that we are called to come for salvation. If that's something you need to receive this morning through obedience to His gospel, we would ask that you seek His salvation, receive His salvation as we stand and sing.